Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we're making a single sleeve sweater dress. For this cozy dress, we kept things relatively simple with a stitch combo we all love, a clean double band that's on the thicker side, and a comfy sleeve for just the right amount of poof. Speaking of, if you like poofs, puffs, ruffles, or any other sleeves, you're in luck. We have hundreds of modern crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 280 grams of yarn, and that's 495 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 6 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you've ever broken a bone. Thankfully, I have never. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and I'll explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting the sweater dress started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 6 millimeter hook. Then we're all going to make an even number chain, the length that we'd like for the sweater to be. So starting at 1 inch underneath your underarm to your total length, so you can stop this at your hips, making it a regular sweater, mid-thigh, which is where I'm going to go, or down to your knees, that's completely up to you. I need roughly 22 inches or 56 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 80, but I actually already have my underarm portion all complete, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. So now that we all have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Now we're going to do our first row, which is a single crochet row. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a single crochet. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, that's 1 single crochet. Let's do 1 more. Into that following chain, insert, pull through, yarn over, and pull through 2, and that's it. Continue with 1 single crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We have put 1 single crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. Now into that last one, we're all going to do an increase of 3. Now because this is going to be an increase of 3, we're going to do a single, half double, and double crochet all into that last chain to keep it from curving. Because if we all put 3 single crochets into that same last chain, our work will start to bend backwards a little bit. So what we're going to do is into that last chain is start with 1 single crochet, then into that same last chain with a half double, so yarn over, into that same last chain, pull through 3, and then into that same last chain with a double crochet, so yarn over, insert, pull through, and then pull through 2, pull through 2. Now everyone's row 1 is complete, and now we should all have 2 additional stitches from the original chain that we made. Now the row sequence for this piece is going to be a single and 2 moss stitch rows. So to get started on our following moss stitch row, we're all going to chain 2. So that first chain is going to count as our turning chain. That second chain is going to count as a chain and flip our work. Now what we're going to do from here is skip that first stitch and then into the next, insert with a single crochet. And now we should all have 2 stitches so far for this row. That first stitch is going to be that chain space that we made when we skipped that first stitch. And the second one is that single crochet that we just made. Let's do this again. We're going to chain 1, skip that following stitch, and then into the next, insert with a single crochet. Now all together we should have 4 stitches. So our first chain space when we got started on this row, our single crochet, our second chain space, and then our next single crochet. From here, we're going to continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet into the next until we reach the end of the row. So we are back. We have just finished up our row 2, which was a moss stitch row. We should all have the same amount of stitches as our previous row, and now we're going to get started on our second moss stitch row. So from where we're at, we're all going to chain 2. Now that first chain is going to count as our turning chain, second chain is going to count as our chain, and flip. Now our second moss stitch row is going to be done pretty much the same way as the first one. So getting this started, right after we chain 2, we're going to skip that first stitch, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, and then into that next stitch, which is our chain space, we're going to insert into there with a single crochet. So just into that entire gap, insert with 1 single crochet, and so far for this row we should all have 2 stitches. That first stitch is that chain space that we have when we skip that first stitch, and that second stitch is that single crochet. Again, we're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, which should be our single crochet from the previous row, and then into that next gap, insert with a single crochet. And that's it. Continue this until we reach the end of the row, but be sure that once we do reach the end of the row, we have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. If we don't, we could be accidentally skipping over the last chain space that we have, because it could very easily collapse in on us, making it look like we don't have an extra stitch. Alright, so we are back. We should all have a total of 1, 2, 3 rows completed. Now, technically, it is going to be a repeat of our 3 previous rows, but since it is an odd number of row repeats, our single crochet may sometimes start at the bottom or sometimes start at the top. Our row 1 started along the bottom of our piece, and then we ended on an increase. But since this next single crochet row starts along the top, we're going to start with our increase now. So let's do that following row together. To get started on the single crochet row that starts along the top, or our row 4, we're all going to chain 3 to prepare for our long stitch along the edge and flip our work. Now that chain 3 doesn't actually count as a stitch. What we're going to do from here is yarn over, and into that first stitch from our previous row, insert with another increase. But since we're along the top end, we're going to start with a double crochet. Then into that same stitch, insert with a half double. And then into that same stitch with a single crochet. And that's it. From here, put 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way down. Now everyone's row 4 is complete. Now since this is still a 3-row repeat, our following 2 rows are going to be moss stitch rows. So once our single crochet row is completed, we should have 2 more stitches than our previous row. And our moss stitch rows, since we aren't doing any increases or decreases, should have the same amount of stitches as our single crochet row. So getting any moss stitch row started, start with a chain 2. That first chain is our turning chain. Second chain is a chain, and flip our work. Then skip that first stitch, and into the next, insert with a single crochet. We should all have 2 stitches so far for this row. There's our first chain space, which is a stitch, and then our single crochet, which is our second stitch. Continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, and single crochet into the next until we reach the end of the row. We are back, and our moss stitch row is complete. We should all have a total of 5 rows, and our following row is going to be another moss stitch row. So chain 2 and flip your work. From here, skip that first stitch, and then into the next, which is our chain space, insert with a single crochet. Chain 1, skip a stitch into the next, which is our chain space again, single crochet. Continue this until we reach the end of the row, and we should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Alright, so we are back. We should all have a total of 6 rows completed. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 6 previous rows that we just did with each other until we have an underarm that can reach from mid-underarm over to the front of our body, roughly around where a bra strap or a tank top strap would be. And we do need to make sure that we're all ending on our second moss stitch row that ends along the top, so that's the increase end. And then once we have that completed, I'll meet you guys back so we can do our shoulder together from there. Alrighty, so we are back. My underarm portion is complete. I have a total of 9 rows. My width is roughly 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to do our shoulder row. And for everyone, no matter what size we're making, we're all going to have just 1 shoulder row. So what we're going to do from here, we all should have ended along the top, and we're going to make an even numbered chain that reaches up to the top of our shoulder. I have already made mine. I made a chain 20, and that's roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters. Now from here, we're all going to do the following row in our row sequence, which should be a single crochet row for everyone. So let's get that started. So now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off with the second chain from our hook, insert with a single crochet. And that's basically it. We're just going to put 1 single crochet into every chain. Then once we reach the body, put 1 single crochet into every stitch into the body. I'll meet you guys back at the end of this 1 shoulder row. Alright, so we are back. Everyone's one shoulder row is complete. Now we're going to get started on the neckline portion. So what we're all going to want to do is put our piece up to ourselves and insert our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch from the top. Where we'd like for this portion to start to curve, I would suggest roughly around mid-chest. Now I've inserted my stitch marker into the 18th stitch from the top, that's roughly 5 inches or 13 centimeters. And now we're going to do our following 2 rows, which are 2 moss stitch rows. So we should all be along the bottom. We're going to do our moss stitch row all the way up until we reach our stitch marker. That row isn't going to have any increases or decreases. Then we're going to do our following moss stitch row, again, making our way all the way back down with no increases and no decreases. And then I'll meet you guys back when we have our 2 following rows completed. Alright, so we are back. We have just finished up our following 2 moss stitch rows. Again, none of those had any increases or decreases. Now we should all be along the bottom again, and now we're going to do our following row in our row sequence, which is a single crochet row. So since we're along the bottom, chain 1, flip your work, and then put 1 single crochet into every stitch until we all have 3 stitches left, and then I'll meet you back so we can decrease together. So we are back, and we all should have left 1, 2, 3, there we go, stitches left. And just remember that if it looks like we only have 2 stitches left, try to pull apart that last stitch because our last stitch should be a chain space. Once we have those 3 stitches, we're going to insert our hook into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, and then into that last chain space, pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4, and our single crochet row is complete. Now the total amount of stitches for the single crochet row should be 2 less stitches than our previous moss stitch row. Now from here we're going to do our following 2 moss stitch rows with absolutely no increases and no decreases, so basically the same way that we did our 2 previous ones. And then I'll meet you guys back when we're about to get started on our following single crochet row, so we should all meet back along the top. Alright, so our following 2 moss stitch rows are complete. Now we're going to get started on our following single crochet row together. And like I said in one of our previous clips, since this is an odd number of row repeats, sometimes our single crochet row for this section is going to end on a decrease or it's going to start with a decrease. This time it's going to start with a decrease. So getting that started, since we're along the top, we're going to chain 1 and flip. And the decrease is going to be done exactly the same. So insert your hook into that first stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, stitch after that, pull through for 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 4. And that's it. From here, put 1 single crochet into the rest of our stitches. And just as a really quick tip for this section, for every single crochet row, there should be 2 less stitches than our previous row because we all need to make sure that we're ending on an even number of stitches. Now from here, all we're going to do is repeat our 6 previous rows until we have a portion that can now reach roughly 2 inches underneath our underarm. And we want to make sure that we're leaving those 2 inches for that band that we're going to do later on along the top to clean up our edges. But once we have this portion completed, I will meet you guys back right after our second moss stitch row. This time it does not need to end along the top or the bottom, just make sure that it's the second moss stitch row, and then we can get started on the rest of our piece from there. Alright, so we are back. The decrease half is all finished up. Now from here we're just going to continue on with our 3-row repeat, but now without any increases or decreases. So we all should have ended right after a second moss stitch row. Now we can end along the top or the bottom. That part doesn't matter at this point. We're just going to do our following single crochet row. No increases, no decreases. Our 2 moss stitch rows, and since our moss stitch rows haven't had any increases or decrease into them yet, those are going to be regular. And just continue to repeat those 3 rows until this can reach across our chest over to the other side of mid underarm. Once we have the total width that we need, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so I am back and I have a total of 53 rows. My total width is roughly 14 inches or 36 centimeters. And now, once we have one of our panels all finished up, we're actually going to make a second panel that is exactly the same. And once we have our second panel all finished up, I will meet you guys back so we can seam everything together. Alrighty, so we are back. Both our front and our back panel are completed, and now we're going to seam everything together. So what we're going to do is insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, and I'm just going to work on the side that doesn't have the strap first. Once when our hook is in through both corners, we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And all we're going to do from here is a single crochet row working in through both the front and the back panel to seam it together. So start by inserting your hook into that first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, and then we're going to single crochet them together. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch into the front, next stitch into the back, and single crochet. And again, next stitch into the front, next stitch into the back, and single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat the same thing we did here on the other side. Alright, so we are back. We have seamed everything up together and now we're ready to get started on our top band, and that's going to be pretty simple. So what we're all going to do is make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of the straps within both the front and the back panel. We're going to seam that together and then get started on our top band. So this shoulder seam is more of like a knot since it's just one row. So all we're going to do is insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and just do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now our seam for the shoulder is pretty much finished. What we're going to do from here is start to work down our strap. So just put 1 single crochet into every stitch. And then once we reach our first side row right over here, I will meet you guys back. So we've made our way all the way down with our single crochet row. Now all we're going to do into each of our side rows is just put 1 single crochet into each of those. So we're all going to start by finding our first side row, and this is mine right here. I'm just going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. Finding our next side row, which this is mine right here, into that with another single crochet. Now those were our 2 moss stitch rows. Everyone's next side row should be a side single crochet row, so find that top loop and insert your hook in through there. It might be a little hard like how mine is, but it can go through with a single crochet, and that's basically it. Just put 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around, and then once we reach our strap within the back panel, put 1 single crochet into every stitch, and then I'll meet you back right after we slip stitch into that chain space that we made when we started off this row. So now that our single crochet row is complete, we are going to be switching out to our 5mm hook, and then we're going to get started on the length of our top band. I'd like for mine to be roughly 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 8. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 3. Now that chain 3 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then we're all going to yarn over, preparing for a double crochet. And then into that chain that we blocked off, or the 4th chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a double crochet. So insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and continue with 1 double crochet into every chain. Now that we've put 1 double crochet into every chain, we're now going to connect it into the base. So all we're going to do is start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1 and there's 2. Into that second stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch, and that slip stitch does not actually count as a stitch. We just need it to connect our row 1. Then, in order to work our way up to the following row, we're all going to slip stitch into the following 2 stitches into the base. So there's 1, and then there's 2, and now we're going to flip our work, but remember that none of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. And now all we're going to do is put 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch. So starting with the yarn over, and inserting our hook into the last stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert, pull through 2, pull through 2. Once more, yarn over, in that next stitch's back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, pull through 2, pull through 2, and continue with 1 back loop double crochet into the rest of our stitches. At the end of the row, chain 3, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the base. Alright, so we are back. We should all have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished, and now we're just going to connect it into the base together once more. So all we're going to do is count up 1, count up 2, and slip stitch into that second stitch into the base to connect our odd number row. Then, just to get started on the following row, we are going to need to slip stitch up the following 2 stitches into the base. There's 1, there's 2, none of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. Flip our work, and then put 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch, and that's it. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way around. Well, we don't have any more stitches left to work into. I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. Alright, so we are back. Our top band is complete. We've made our way all the way around. We don't have any more stitches left to work into. So now we're just going to seam it all together. So let's first make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out, meaning our side seams are along the outside. Then what we're going to do from here is a single crochet seam, so the same seam that we did for the sides. So just to do the first one, let's all start by inserting our hook into that first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet everything together, and that's pretty much it for this portion. Continue on with our single crochet seam until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alrighty, so now that our top band is all seamed up, the next thing we're going to do is our sleeve. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out now, meaning all of our seams are along the inside. Then we're going to be inserting our 6mm hook into any one of the stitches that we have that's nearest to our side seam into our armhole. Then from here, we're all going to do a single crochet row. So working our way up our underarm, we're going to be putting 2 single crochets into every side single crochet row. And we're doing 2 single crochets because the last stitch in our side single crochet rows should be either a double crochet or a chain 3, and those stitches are a little bit wider. And then 1 single crochet into every moss stitch row because those are a little bit shorter. So let's get this started. We're all going to start by doing a chain 1 to secure, that doesn't count as a stitch, and finding our first side row. Now everyone's first side row should be a side single crochet row, just like this one. And we're going to find that top loop and insert our hook in through there with 2 single crochets. So there is 1, and then into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Now into our following side row, it should be a moss stitch row for everyone. Find that top loop and insert with 1 single. Again, everyone's next side row should be another moss stitch row, so find that top loop and insert with a single. And that's it. Let's do this set again. Everyone's following side row should be a side single crochet row. Find that top loop, insert with 2 singles, there's 1, there's 2, and then 1 single crochet into each of the following 2 moss stitch rows. We're going to continue this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, we should have some regular stitches to work into. So just put 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up until we reach our shoulder seam, and then I will meet you guys back. So we have made our way all the way up until we have reached our shoulder seam. Now all we're going to do is insert a stitch marker into that last stitch on this side of our shoulder seam, and then also insert a stitch marker into the following stitch as well. So into that next available stitch on the other side of our shoulder seam, we're going to insert with a single crochet. And don't forget to insert a stitch marker into that stitch as well, just so we know where our 2 middle stitches are. Now all we're going to do from here is continue to put 1 single crochet into every stitch. Once we reach the underarm portion, continue to put 1 single crochet into every side moss stitch row, 2 single crochet into every side single crochet row, and then make your way all the way down and slip stitch into that chain space. We should have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our stitch markers, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so we are back. Our single crochet row along our armhole is complete, and now we're all going to make an even number chain the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. Now I'd like for mine to be roughly 19 inches or 48 centimeters, so I'm going to start off by making a chain of 68. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do a single crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a single crochet. And from here, put 1 single crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. So I've made my way all the way down with my single crochet row, and I left my last chain. Now into that last chain, we're going to do an increase, and this is going to be an increase of 3 single crochets. Now all we're going to do is insert into that last chain with 1, with 2, and with 3 single crochets. If your increase starts to curve just a little bit, that's fine. It'll all even out once when everything is all seamed up, but now we just need to connect it into the base. So how we're going to connect any odd number row into the base is we're going to slip stitch just into that following stitch into the base. Now that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, it's just to connect. Then we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. That also does not count as a stitch, and we're going to flip our work. Now our sleeve is going to have the same 3-row repeat as the body portion, so our following row is going to be a moss stitch row. Now whenever we're working on a moss stitch row, starting at the base and working our way out towards the outer edge, we are always going to start that with a chain 1. We're going to skip that first stitch, and we want to make sure that we're counting that first stitch from our previous row, not the slip stitches into the base, and we're going to single crochet into the next. And because we skipped that first stitch, we should all have our first chain space and a single crochet, making up our first 2 stitches for this row. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, and we're going to continue to do our moss stitch to reach the end of the row. So we've made our way all the way down, and our row 2 is complete. Our following row is going to be yet another moss stitch row, so that's going to be started off pretty much the same way as all the moss stitch rows for the body. So we're all going to chain 2. That first chain is going to count as our turning chain, second chain is going to count as a chain, flip our work, skip that first stitch from our previous row, which should be the last single crochet, and then into that next stitch, which should be our chain space, insert with a single, chain 1, skip a stitch, single. Continue this until you reach the end of the row. We are back and our first 1, 2, 3 rows are complete. Now let's connect our row 3 into the base. So all we're going to do, find that next available stitch into the base and slip stitch it into there. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch. Now from here, it's going to continue to be our 3-row repeat, but the same rules applies as the body. So since we have an odd number of rows for the row repeat, sometimes our single crochet row is going to end on an increase of 3, and sometimes they're going to start with an increase of 3. So I'm just going to do the following single crochet row with you. So in order to work our way up to the following row, all we're going to do is slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch, and we're going to flip our work. Now from here, whenever we're getting started on our single crochet row that starts along the base, we're going to start with an increase of 3 single crochets. So finding the last stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert with 3 singles, and we want to make sure that we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base. So into the top of that first stitch with 1, with 2, with 3 single crochets, then 1 single crochet into the rest of our stitches for this row. Then at the end of the row, we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and then do our moss stitch row all the way back down towards the base. And then I'll meet you guys back just so we can connect that row together once more. Alright, so we are back. We have finished up our single crochet row and then made our way back down towards the base with our moss stitch row, and now we're going to connect it into the base together. So we're about to connect our row 5 in that. And all we're going to do is slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. And now it's connected. And we're just going to get started on the following row together as well. So slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. None of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch, and flip your work. And this is going to be a moss stitch row. So like I said in one of our previous clips, whenever we're getting started on a moss stitch row that starts along the base, we are always going to chain 1, skip that first stitch, and then into the next with a single crochet. And that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 6 previous rows until we are worked into our first stitch marker stitch. Once we have that, I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the second half of our sleeve. Alright, so we are back. We have just finished up the increase side of our sleeve, and now we're basically going to do the exact same thing that we did here, but instead of increases into the stitches nearest to the base, we're going to be doing decreases. Now what we're all going to do from here is we're going to mirror everything that we did here on the other side. So the following row may be a little bit different for everyone. So I'm just going to take a look at the last row that I did, which for me was just 1 moss stitch row because the row right before that was a single crochet row. But you guys go ahead and do however many moss stitch rows you guys need to do until you reach your following single crochet row, and you can end along the outer edge or the base. That does not matter. I'll just meet you guys back at your next single crochet row. Alright, so we are back. I have done the following row that I needed to do right before I reached my next single crochet row, which was just 1 moss stitch row for me. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we've been connecting it, and then we'll do the following single crochet row together. So my following single crochet row is going to start along the base. Now like I said, since this is an odd number of row repeats, sometimes it's going to start at the base, sometimes a single crochet row is going to start along the outer edge. I will do the outer edge one with y'all as well, but just to do this one together, since I have just slip stitched into that next stitch into the base, I'm now going to flip my work. Now to get started on this single crochet row, we're all going to insert our hook into that first stitch, making sure we're not working in through any of those slip stitches, and pull through. Next stitch, pull through, and stitch right after that, and pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 4. Then from here, continue with 1 single crochet into the rest of our stitches. Now I'm going to do my following 2 moss stitch rows. Those won't have any increases or decreases, and then I'll meet you guys back so we can do 1 more single crochet row together. Alright, so we are back. I have just finished up my following 2 moss stitch rows, and I did the first portion of my single crochet row as well. So this single crochet row for me ended along the outer edge, so I just did a chain 1, flip my work, and then put 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 3 stitches, and now we're going to do a decrease of 3 together. So all that's going to be is insert our hook into that following stitch, pull through, that next stitch, pull through, and then into that next stitch and pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. Then we're just going to connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing, and from here we're just going to continue to repeat these rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam everything together. Alright, so we are back. The decreased side of our sleeve is complete. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're just going to seam it all up together. So what we're all going to do is make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out. Then what we're going to do is yarn over, pull through everything, and just to do the first one, since we should all already know how to do this, find that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to keep doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back to get started on the cuff. Alright, so we are back. Our sleeve is completed, and now we're going to single crochet along the top while doing some decreases to get it to cinch for our cup. So first things first, we're going to be inserting our same 6mm hook into any one of our side rows along the bottom of our sleeve. Make sure that our work is now flipped right side out, meaning all of our seams are along the inside. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and start with a chain of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do a decrease of 2 single crochets. So start by finding our first side row, and this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert. Then I'm going to pull through. This is my following side row. Inserting through there, pull through, then yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do another decrease together. This is my following side row. Find that top loop, pull through. This is my following side row, find that top loop, pull through, and pull through all 3, and that's it. We're going to continue on with our decrease of 2 single crochets into every side row, making our way all the way around. We should end up with half the amount of rows that we made for our sleeve. We are back. Our single crochet row along the bottom of our sleeve is complete, and now from here we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like the cuff to be. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, I'm going to start by making a chain 8, and that's roughly 2 inches or 6 centimeters. Alright, so now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and now we're going to slip stitch all the way down. So inserting into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert, then yarn over and gently pull through both of those loops on our hook. Let's do this again. Into that next chain, insert, yarn over, and gently pull through 2. And that's it. We're going to continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, and we do want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row can be too tight to work into. So now that we put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're now going to connect it into the base. So how we're going to do that is start by finding that next available stitch into the base. We're going to insert our hook in through there with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then we need to work our way up to the following row as well. So slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. Flip our work, and now put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So into that last stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us. Then again, yarn over and gently pull through everything. Once more into that next stitch's back loop, yarn over and pull through everything, and that's it. Continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now when we reach the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the base just once more. We are back, and we should all have 1, 2, 3 rows completed. Now we're going to connect it into the base together just once more, and it is going to be done exactly the same way as our previous rows. So insert your hook into that next available stitch into the base with a slip stitch. That does not count as a stitch. Then, to work your way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows with no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam everything together. Alright, so we are back. We have finished up our cuff. We made our way all the way around. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're just going to seam everything together. Now this seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam so that it looks like another back loop slip stitch row. So we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and then we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. All we're going to do is yarn over and pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now from here, we're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only into that front loop. Next, we're going to find that next stitch into the back panel and insert only into that back loop. Then when we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Now that is our first outside loop slip stitch seam. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Into the next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop. pull through all 3. Let's do just one more. Next stitch into the front, insert into the front loop. Next stitch into the back, insert into that back loop, and pull through all 3. And we're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that our cuff is all seamed up, we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all on the next one. Bye!